Hey there. In my last video, The Next Shunning, I spoke briefly about the season when I dated some witness boys. So that does kind of feed into my story, so I wanted to spend a video talking about that. So I dated a boy, man by the name of David, and David was an electrician and he was a ministerial servant, that's a step down from an elder in Jehovah's Witness hierarchy. So he had responsibilities in the congregation, and did that make my family happy? We went out a few times and he talked quite a bit about marriage and things like that, which is sort of normal in the whole Jehovah's Witness thing, because that's why you date. And we were physical with each other in a limited, capacity. But he had a friend named Curtis, and Curtis would come into my story later on too. But as quickly as David had come into my radar, he also vanished. He ghosted me back way before that term started becoming what it means today. But he did the same thing. He just didn't call anymore. And so then I was at a quick build, and that's what we used to call when we would build a Kingdom Hall in one weekend. So many different crews of Jehovah's Witness volunteers would come into an area, and it was everything from they would already have the foundation laid, but they would have the electrical crew would come in, the framing crew, the roofing crew, the wallpaper crew, each little crew would come in and they would get everything done on a weekend. And by Sunday night, they were putting in the landscaping, and the Kingdom Hall was done. So I was on a couple of crews. I was on a landscaping crew and I was on a wallpaper crew. And at one quick build, I met a guy who was on the roofing crew, and his name was Anthony. Anthony called himself the Italian Stallion. And he was quite handsome young man, and he flirted with me from the roof. And we did go out that night, and we began to see each other. And he had a couple of friends that I became friends with through him. One was Jimmy. Hey, Jimmy. And we're still friends to this day. Jimmy was real special to me because he had a lot of qualities that my middle brother had, and I was very, very close to my middle brother. My middle brother was and is an elder to this day, but he had effeminate qualities, and back then it was nobody wanted to talk about it out loud. Anyway, one of those people has become his true self, and I'm super proud of him, and the other one is still living a lie. So anyway, sorry about that, bro. So Anthony's friend was Jimmy, and we were great buds. We shopped together, and he kind of had a crush on a girlfriend of mine. And then he had this friend, his name was Ralphie, and Ralphie was a little kid. He was 15, and we were the ripe old age of 18. And he was kind of what he sounds like. He was kind of an annoying little kid, and he was our chaperone. So when we would go out, he would come with us, and he would sit in the back seat. And I can still remember he would be back there singing, and it was kind of terrible. He was one of those people who thought he had a very beautiful voice, and Anthony would be like, "Oh, Ralphie, you have such a nice voice," and then he would look over at me and be like, but that's what I remember. So Anthony and I dated for about 6 months, and during that time my family went on a vacation, and we went skiing, and we went with a girlfriend of mine who was married to an elder. She and I were friends. I think she's about 10 years older than me, and so she was kind of the same age as my sister, who had left, and she kind of took that place in my life during that time. And while we were on that trip, I don't know who came on to who, but she and Anthony had an experience together, and Anthony ended up staying with my friend and her husband when my family and I came home, and that was basically our breakup. So I tell you all that to tell you this. I don't remember if Anthony ghosted me or if there was like an official breakup, but his little friend Ralphie was like, he was his, you know, he had been his buddy, his best friend, but he would always like call me, and that was back before the age of cell phones or anything like that. So we would like talk on the phone, and we would see each other at get-togethers, at skating parties. Y'all, all XJWs know how important skating parties were to teenage kids back then. And when he found out that Anthony had done me wrong, he was like, that's it, our friendship is over. And he was super mad at him, and he was going to be my friend forever. Well, I knew, because he had admitted at 15, like he had the biggest crush on me, and I was like, you know, okay, this little kid or whatever. And so he came over to my house one weekend, and he ended up like spending the night at my house. And it was okay with my parents. I don't know why. I guess because they figured, well, he's 3 years younger than her. This is not like a romance thing or whatever. And he was very good at sucking up and putting on like the old Eddie Haskell face. Oh, hello, brother and sister Kirkpatrick. Well, anyway, the next day, his mother, who lived in McKinney, found out that he was spending the night at my house, and she was infuriated. And she got her best friend in the car, and they drove from McKinney to Haltom City. And so here came Kathleen and her friend, it was Anthony's mom. And they came and they sat in the living room with my parents, and Kathleen was just really taking my parents on, like, why in the world would you allow my son to spend the night at your house, and blah, 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 blah. And Ralphie was very, he was very defensive of the whole thing, and, you know, he was really mad at Anthony, and here was Anthony's mom, who was there in my living room. And I can't remember how it came up, but Ralphie had told me a big, dirty secret about Anthony. That not only had he come on to my friend at on our skiing trip, which pretty much ended my friendship with that you know, sister, but he said, oh, he has a history of doing this, because there were these two girls in our circuit, or in his circuit. Monica was one of their names, and I can't remember the other one. But their mom was, I guess, a little bit on the loose side, and that she had some sort of like sexual encounter with Anthony. And so Ralphie had told me this, and there was some critical moment in the evening where like the tension was so great. And I can't remember, I think it was me, and I said, well, if you don't tell them, I'm gonna, or something like that. And so then Ralphie told the secret about Anthony, and how that he had had this sexual encounter with Monica's mom, and Anthony's mother was right there, and she was furious with him. So anyway, he got busted, and then Ralphie got busted for like the whole summer, and he wasn't allowed to do anything like for the whole entire summer. And his story, kind of like for the rest of his life, was that it was so worth it because he got to spend the night at my house. It was that next fall that I was married to Jeff, that I, had my fill of witness boys and everything. And so then I got disfellowshipped. And so Ralphie was really sad that I was disfellowshipped. But then, a year later, I got reinstated, and he would actually come and visit us. And he stayed with us in our little house, the little house that we had bought. He would stay with us when he would come to Fort Worth for the conventions, because he would always volunteer at those conventions. And so anyway, he was like my little brother, and he would come and stay with us. And then finally, after Jeff and I separated, Ralphie had moved upstate New York with his friend Chris, and they had like escaped McKinney, because that was all the people in the Kingdom Hall said, you'll never leave here, and if you ever leave, you'll always come back. And they decided that they were going to go see the world. Anyway, he was very lonely while he was there, and he was writing letters to like everybody in his address book. And of course, Jeff and Brenda were in that address book. And so he sent us a letter and said, this is what I'm doing, and I miss you, and all of that. And I wrote back and I said, well, it's no longer Jeff and Brenda, it's just me, because here's that situation. And the very next week, I got a phone call, and it was Ralphie.